We have two guests with us, Kirsten Lombard, who has been on the show before, political activist from Wisconsin, and someone who's grown into a friend, really. I mean, we've met each other once or twice. And then we have Scott Noble, who is running for office here in Wisconsin with a very interesting story to tell. Welcome to the show, guys. How are you guys doing?
Hello. Great to be here. Thanks so much for having us on, Josh.
Yes, it's been great to be on here. I love talking about this issue, and it's great to be talking about it with Josh and Kirsten.
Well, let's start with you, Scott, because your situation really prompted this conversation. Let's start first with who you are in the office that you're running for, and then we'll get to the fascinating aspect of this. Okay,
well, my name is Scott Kenneth Noble, and I'm running for State Senate, District 24. It's the area right when I say, Wisconsin is at the center of American politics. We're actually at the center of American politics. We have cities like Wisconsin Rapids, Stevens Point, Tomah, Sparta, and Wautoma. So that area right in central and western Wisconsin. And so my opponent is probably most noted for being called a runner in one of the Wisconsin 14 that left the state to try to stop balancing the budget in Wisconsin.
Now, hold on one second right there, because we do have listeners in all 50 states, and, the political attention span of Americans is about the size of a gnat. So let's kind of cover what that was about. Kirsten, can you comment on the runners? Because people who are living in California might not be aware of what we're talking about or the depth of the situation there.
Absolutely. Well, everybody probably remembers that about a year and a half ago, things in Wisconsin just kind of exploded. Our Governor Scott Walker, and our state legislature were working to bring our budget under control. And one of the things that they were attempting to do in order to make that budgeting process happen correctly is revoke a privilege that had been granted back in the 1950s to allow public employees to collectively bargain. And it was a little strange the way that they went about doing that, because I don't think they were entirely honest with the public about exactly what they were doing and why, and really it allowed the unions to spin things whichever way they wanted, and the state just sort of exploded, and it got very divisive. And ultimately what happened is, in order to prevent our state legislature from passing the legislation that would allow them to bring that budget back under control by removing most collective bargaining rights, 14 of our state Democratic senators fled the state in order to prevent that vote from happening. And they were gone for quite a long time, and it's pretty apparent that they were being supported by the unions while they were out of state.
So here we have a situation where people left their responsibility. And, what was alarming to me at the time, because I came to Wisconsin and I was, kind of politically active in that situation. What was alarming to me at the time was how many people who weren't diehard Democrats but voted that way actually saw that as an eye-opening experience. Wait a second, why would you leave? Even if you don't agree, you stay here and fight. You don't run away. And
right.
Isn't that something that your candidate, Scott, is now having to either live up to and take credit for from those who support it, or avoid from those who view it as something of almost a cowardly act?
Completely. That's what I'm finding is a lot of people that probably lean independent, or some that have approached me were former supporters. This candidate, Senator Julie Lassa, she's the incumbent, and she's won in landslide elections in past years. And that was a different district. It's been redistricted, so it's we're neck and neck now with her. But to be clear, a lot of the people that supported her in the past have told me over and over and over that was the deal breaker. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. They're going to be voting against her because of that, not by not representing him, being derelict of her duty, and running from her oath of office. That was too much for them to support her again in this election.
And I think that's just an example of how people are getting fed up with politicians. And I know national politics gets the most attention. And when we look at Washington, D.C., if we take off the D or the R, Washington, D.C. only has a 12% approval rating, which means 88% of us don't agree with what they're up to. And I think that same sentiment is true on the state level, and I think that was kind of lived out in a lot of people's cases. I mean, obviously, the people who supported these runners and the people who got loud around the Capitol made world news. But there were a lot of people who were part of that party who said, you know what, this is just absolutely nuts. And I'm not trying to weigh in politically which was the right thing to do or not. I'm just trying to convey the sentiment of the voters. So have you garnished a lot of support from former Democrats who have said to you, okay, not only do I not agree with what she's done, but now I'm actually going to swing my support someplace else? Or have they just become disenfranchised and they don't want to participate at all?
No, there's a lot of people. I benefit from being not her. And that's hard for me to admit sometimes, because sometimes I really like to say it's about freedom, it's about liberty, it's about, what's happening. But I benefit a lot from people that are just upset with Julie Lassa. I was in Wisconsin Rapids, and I was, approached by a person that, had to tell me their story. I says, hey, okay, why would you flip from being a supporter of Julie Lassa to putting a sign of mine in your yard? He says, I got to talk to her about that. I put my arm around her and I said, I used to hang door hangers for you. I used to knock on doors. I put you in office, but this time I'm going to campaign against you. And he kind of smiled and he pointed at my sign that was sitting, it was actually down at the mall where they have the Victory Center in Rapids. And he pointed at my sign and he says, I got that sign in my yard. And I told Julie Lassa, I'm going to be campaigning against you because you left the state, because you were derelict of your duty and ran from your oath of office. And the cherry on top is she got paid over $3,000 for doing nothing. That doesn't square with Western and Central Wisconsin values.
Well, you know what else doesn't square with Wisconsin values is this idea that there might even be a hint of manipulation. Now, let's get to the story that really prompted your appearance today. Tell us about the process now. Okay, so everybody's going to go vote. Then those ballots are going to be counted. First, we're going to take a break. That's called a tease. And then we'll get to the problem right after this. Don't go anywhere, folks. We'll be right back. So Scott Noble decides to run for office, and he's got a competitor. He's outlined the competition, has his campaign plan all together. He's going out there getting votes, running for an office that is available. And I want to make this point. A lot of people, just like Scott, can run for office. So wherever you are across the country, don't think, well, I can't do it. When I voted in my primary, there were 5 uncontested seats. All you'd have to do is show up, sign the paper, get the signatures, and you're on. But anyway, so Scott's running for office. Everybody's going to vote in less than 2 weeks. Now, Scott, tell us the really freaky part about this, because this is just absolutely mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, it is mind-blowing. It applies at all levels. Well, to give you a little background about the 24th Senate District, I mentioned the cities that were in there. There's Sparta, which is about 9,500 people. There's Tomah, about 9,000. Wisconsin Rapids, a little over 18,000. And Wautoma, like 2,200. Now, there's one very large city by central Wisconsin standards, and that's Stevens Point. The population is nearly 28,000. And the city clerk of that particular city is the husband of my opponent. And so he's out there now. He campaigns on the weekends. He's got her campaign shirt on. He's handing out the Packer schedules that have Vote Julie Lassa on November 6th. And he comes in at 8 o'clock on Monday morning, and he's working on getting people at the university signed up for absentee ballots and getting them registered, and that's even been reported in the paper. And at a recent debate, I charged this to him, and I said, I demand that you recuse yourself from this election. And I also said it wasn't just because of the obvious conflict of interest that her husband's counting the votes in her race, but I see Stevens Point as a swing vote for the state of Wisconsin in the presidential election.
Well, now let's talk about that a little bit, because you said, he's responsible for counting the votes. Kirsten, you're really versed in how politics in Wisconsin works. A lot of people are going to say, well, maybe, he's just supporting his wife. Obviously, nobody can disagree with his desire to do that, and he's actually not going to be involved in counting anything. So is there really something to be concerned about?
Oh, look, I think everybody who's looking at this knows this is a bad idea. I think even the people who are on Julie Lasse's team know that this is really not kosher. The question is, will they make excuses for it or not? And I think you probably have a bit of a toss-up, but I think more people than not are going to say this is a bad idea. Whether he will actually, do the right thing here, whether the Lasses actually understand how bad this is for them optically and do the right thing, that's anybody's guess. I mean, Julie Lasse didn't have the good sense to know it was bad optically for her to leave the state of Wisconsin a year and a half ago. So, these aren't people who are maybe they're using their heads in the same way that you and I would. But I do think that there are an awful lot of people in Wisconsin looking at this point, and particularly in that district, saying not kosher.
Well, and I would think, I'm glad you said that, because I would think if I was put in the same position as your opponent, I would want there to be no shadow of a doubt of my victory if I were to have one. And I would even ask my husband, hey, can you just step aside? Because wouldn't you want to have the appearance of an honest-to-goodness win and not even have a hint? And I'm not saying that there's going to be, but wouldn't you not even want to have a hint that there could have been some foul play?
Well, of course, that's exactly what you and I would want. I think, though, what we're seeing is that we're dealing with people where the means justify the ends. There is, as long as you've solved a problem, the problem is solved. You know what I mean? They don't necessarily look at this as a problem that is going to haunt them long term.
So, Scott, how do you counter this from a political perspective? I know a lot of new politicians or people who are just entering this world are looking at this story and thinking, oh my goodness, how would you even deal with something like that? What's the strategy behind this? Are you letting this be known? Is this something that you're using to your advantage, or just something that you've alerted the press to and hopefully that they take it up for you?
Well, yeah, it's not a central issue in our campaign. It's more of just a hint at the arrogance of my opponent. I had a long day of debates. I've just finished our fourth debate last night. We had 2 in one day, and I bring this up every time. But the second debate was held in Wisconsin Rapids. So if you want to see a little clip of it, it's interesting because the city clerk in question, his name is different than hers, by the way. It's John Moe, M-O-E. And so they don't have the same name. But he was sitting in the front row with his iPhone, and he was filming me. So it was kind of interesting. During the debate, I got to kind of point to him and say, well, this person sitting here is going to be counting our votes. And he was obviously doing campaign work for her because she has a couple $100,000 and she's already spent well over 100 sending out mailers and being on the radio basically talking about let's stop Scott Noble's Tea Party agenda. He's wrong for Wisconsin. He's too extreme for Wisconsin. This man wants to control your life. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that's been sent out. And it's the exact opposite of our campaign. So it's just interesting that they're trying to cover all their bets on this by being completely arrogant in the sense that he's already refused. This has been through the whole Gannett media system, which is, like the Sheboygan Press, the Green Bay Press Gazette, Oshkosh Northwestern, Marshall News Herald, Stevens Point Journal, Wisconsin Rapids Daily Tribune. I mean, it's been in everything. And it got picked up by Wisconsin Public Radio. And he's refused to do it. And I want to make this clear. I've not said he's done anything wrong or would do anything wrong. I don't want an appearance of impropriety. And that's really what this is about.
Definitely. And it's something that I would think everybody would want, especially in this day and age where we're so frustrated with the way this is going, where the Democrats have seen at their national convention the voice of their delegates ignored. The Republicans have seen the voice of their delegates ignored. Everybody seems to be on their tippy toes thinking, okay, we have to be diligent here to get rid of any hint of impropriety. You would think that it would be something that she would get behind. Has the state party said anything to her? Like, has the state Democrats, Kirsten, maybe you can answer this, have they come out and said, okay, well, maybe you should have your husband recuse himself of his duties?
Insofar as I'm aware, that message has not been sent. Scott, are you aware of anything?
No, I know they've left it to their campaign because really it's interesting. The state party's not doing much in her race. I mean, she's got so much money. All the attack ads and everything, all the decisions are being made right from Friends of Julie Lassa. So really the state party is involved in other races, and, all they do is send out a couple of stupid press releases that, don't mean anything. I mean, really when you look at their main argument, they're saying that, and Julie said this in a number of debates, her main objective is saying that we've always done this, and guess what? City clerks oversee their own races. I mean, she says that like that's a good thing. And I just don't operate from this premise that if just because we've done something for a long time doesn't mean it's right.
Agreed.
And so I want to pursue legislation to get rid of this.
I agree, and I think that is the more shocking point, is not that the Democratic Party of Wisconsin has not said anything, but the Government Accountability Board of Wisconsin has not said anything about this.
Yeah, but does that really surprise any of us that much?
They did say something. They did say something.
What did they?
All they said is they were interviewed, I think Glenn Moberg from WPR, and I think there's an online newspaper, Stevens Point City Times, that did get in touch with them. They said there's nothing on the books that says that a candidate's spouse or family member cannot, oversee their vote. The only person that's not allowed is the candidate. The candidate is not allowed, and it's kind of interesting because I'm not allowed in there until after the vote is completed. So after the last minute of voting, I could actually go in there.
Well, guys, let's take another commercial break. Hold on one second. We're up against the break. Let's take another break, and then I'd like to talk a little bit about the process itself. What got you involved in politics, and do you recommend other people do the same? So we'll be back right after this. All right, we're talking with Scott Noble and Kirsten Lombard. Now, Scott, you wanted to just add a little bit or clarify something about those who are supposed to be watching over this process and making sure everybody's held accountable?
Yeah, I mean, when we look at, the Government Accountability Board, they've made a statement, and I think Kirsten said it in a really good way. They did nothing. So one of the things here that is kind of underlying is, we're going to win this election, and I'm going to be pursuing legislation to make sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen.
I know there are many of us in Wisconsin who are praying that you get through this election successfully, and that you are one of our newest state senators here in Wisconsin, and that you will press on to actually finally call the GAB to account.
Now let's talk a little bit about that, because we're running out of show. Yeah, we're running out of show. Okay. Go ahead, Scott. Go ahead.
Well, one quick thing I was saying, could I ask a favor of your listenership? One thing we really need to do is, if you could just go to our Facebook page, it's Noble for Senate, Facebook.com/Noble for Senate, and like the page. And if they go to the website, it'd be great if they could just take this video that talks about this situation and post it on their Facebook and on their Twitter, because we are the media. I mean, if this is to get out on a national level or even a Wisconsin level to what we want to have done, we need to get the word out ourselves. Because the media, not everybody's like Josh Tolley. I mean, not everybody's out there reporting the truth. And
you're right, and it is, and I kind of want to talk about our responsibility with the time we have left. You decided to run for office, and I want to talk a little bit about that because I think it's vitally important. Part of the problem is, and Kirsten, you can attest to this too, we have so many opportunities for victory that we just don't take. I mean, like I said in the intro to this interview, on my recent primary ballot, there were 5 empty spots. All they had to do is show up. So what prompted you to do what other people weren't willing to do? What made you want to run for office?
Well, I was inspired by U.S. Senator Rand Paul. He talked about how the Republican Party is an empty vessel. And I can attest to that. I mean, I'm filling this huge vessel with something that would have just done nothing. You know what I'm saying? I mean,
yeah, I do.
Like when you look at your ballot in the primary and you got all these uncontested races, I mean, it must not be even fun for you to go vote.
Well, in a sense, it's almost disheartening because you're thinking, okay, this is our opportunity for change. And, of course, the big names are on there, but you get to the ones that really do matter, county board seats, school board seats, and there's nobody there. And you're thinking, oh, my goodness, this is part of the problem. And, Kirsten, would you agree with that? Do you think there's this this level of disenfranchisement that is so poignant that people just say, you know, I'm going to put my hands up, I don't care, and we're missing so many opportunities that we could be winning?
Yeah, I think that is exactly right, and frankly, it's very disheartening for me too when I walk into my polling place and I see not only that school board and county board and common council are uncontested in my location, but also judgeships. I mean, we've literally handed over judgeships to, you know, all the wrong people because the right people aren't stepping up or the right people aren't going out and actively recruiting people to run for those offices. You know, if we don't have, you know, friendly faces in the court, if we don't have people who really understand the Constitution and are going to support it, who understand the rule of law, who aren't trying to twist it and legislate from the bench, if we do not have people who are the right people in those judicial seats, my goodness, that mucks up everything else because you can't contest anything successfully. So, I mean, yeah, there is a real problem. For something that I've been advocating for a very long time now, for probably about 3 years, is something that is called either the Precinct Committeeman Project or the Ward Committeeman Project, depending on where you live. Here in Wisconsin, we tend to refer to wards more than we refer to precincts. But the idea that in your neighborhood, if you are building relationships, if you know who lives around you, you can get people to the polls. You can get the right people to the polls because it is not ever about just getting people to the polls on election day. It's about getting the right people to the polls. But knowing the people in your neighborhood does you about 20 times better than just getting people to the polls because it allows you to actively recruit people for school board. It allows you to actively figure out who would be best on county board, who would be best in your city council, and all sorts of other positions, whether it's a state assemblyman or a state senator like Scott. Having those relationships allows you to actually see who you can recruit for these various positions. And hopefully, if it's not you, there's somebody living next door to you that would be good. But people actually have to get active. They have to get out in their neighborhoods, and they have to be building those relationships in order to see who's who and what's what.
Well, I think that was said brilliantly because I talk about that all the time. You know, learn who your neighbors are, and when you attach that to representation, it just, you know, puts a nail in the coffin as to why it's important. We have only about 2 minutes left. Talk a little bit, and you can decide amongst yourself who wants to field this, but take a little bit of time and address the importance of Wisconsin politics. So many people write off Wisconsin, you know, it's the flyover state, it's a road to nowhere, there's only, you know, less than 6 million people. Why should people care about what's going on in Wisconsin?
Well, I'd like to take that one if you could, Josh. Yeah, what we're seeing here is a complete. I mean, who would have thought that Paul Ryan would be on the presidential ticket? I mean, that's changed the dynamics of Wisconsin. There's a lot of people that I'm talking to, and I'm hearing in a lot of different circles that are going to come out and vote just because you have a hometown person, Paul Ryan, on the top of the ticket. You know, and then you look at all these other, and that's what's even more particularly interesting about my Senate race. You've got Tommy Thompson is the Senate candidate, and he's the adopted son of Monroe County, you know, the Thomas Sparta area. And then you have a congressional race, Colonel Boland. He's running for Congress against Ron Kind. I mean, he's probably the worst congressman that's ever been. You know, I mean, even when Tammy Baldwin voted to audit the Fed, Ron Kind voted against auditing the Fed. You know, so it's interesting. All these things that are happening are kind of linchpins to the whole country. As far as when I say that Wisconsin at the center of politics in America, I mean that with all my heart. I'm not saying that just because it seems expedient for my race. It is really not an arguable point at this point that Wisconsin is going to be a decider in this overall future of American politics.
Well, I think also if you look at how Wisconsin has really led the way over the last year and a half or so, look at what we've done on Act 10 with saying, hey, look, if you can't afford to give people a privilege anymore, it's time to rescind the privilege. Not because we don't like people, not because we want to be big meanies, but because budgets matter, and if budgets aren't in place, then everybody suffers. Scott Walker and our state legislature did that without anybody losing a job. They could have laid people off. Instead, they didn't. So there's that. There's what we did on health care. The governor finally saying, look, no, we're
up against the end of the show. We're up against the end of the show. I want to thank you both. I mean, we could talk about this for days. Politics is called the sports for adults for a reason, I guess. It's very captivating. And, Kirsten, you and I have spoken, and even with politicians who you agree with and who have victories in areas where you support, there's still a call to hold them accountable. And I want to have you on the show again because some of the people who Republicans and Democrats think are supporters of their agenda are really in backroom deals working against the very framework of this nation. And I think that's an important conversation as well. So thank you both, Scott. Best of luck in your race there. We'll have to keep tabs on that. And that does it for today, folks. Today, tomorrow, and as always, may your path lead to heaven, and may freedom follow in your footsteps.